It was hard to leave this flower garden because it had a deep ditch all around it and tall walls, and trying to escape usually meant you wouldn't survive. Someone said that if a queen's face was badly hurt, so only her close friends would recognize her, it wouldn't be hard to trick people. And if her head was wrapped in bandages and she couldn't talk very well, someone who only saw her once a month might not even know it was her. It would be even better if the visitor wasn't expected to stay in the woman's rooms for very long. Are you saying the missing woman was helping with the plan? I don't know for sure. It just seems like a good guess. Maomao had a few ideas about why the women might do this, but she thought they were a little less likely, so she kept them to herself. Maybe Consort Jin was upset that another woman who looked like her had won the attention of an important man, while she hadn't even received a visit from the emperor. She looked for every chance to annoy the woman, and their teasing finally became a fight. Jin ended up dying, either on purpose or by accident. The other ladies who helped her weren't very fond of their mistress anyway, so they decided to tell a lie. They said the consort had gotten sick to protect themselves, and because they felt sorry for the other lady. She felt very guilty and had to become part of their plan, but her upcoming wedding could ruin everything. When her time working for them was finished, Jinchi would arrive next month and have no one to visit. Maomao felt worried. The women who helped the empress had been really surprised. Maybe it's best to let the important people decide what happened, she thought. She took a drink of tea and thought about it. Gaeshun seemed to know she didn't want to guess out loud, so he didn't ask her any more questions. He did ask one question. How did you know she was buried there? There weren't any signs that someone was buried in the dirt Maomao had picked. Someone who wasn't sure might have thought Maomao herself put her there. Dirt isn't the only clue. Lots of mushrooms had grown over where she was buried, and different kinds of mushrooms grow in different places. My adoptive father told me this kind of mushroom grows best in animal waste or near dead animals. You didn't usually see them anywhere else. That's why Maomao was so happy when she found the mushrooms. She thought they were growing in the overflowing waste from the sewers. It was already pretty bad, but now she realized she'd been picking mushrooms right over where a person had died. She thought that explained the smell. She said sorry she hadn't been sure what it was because she wasn't supposed to touch dead bodies. The sewer hadn't been blocked. It was just the smell of something rotting coming from the ground as the weather got warmer. Yinghua understood why the smell bothered her so much. Gaeshun made a face again, his eyebrows furrowed deeply. She felt like he was staring right at her. Can I ask one more question? He said, and it made her a little nervous. What are you going to do with all the mushrooms you gathered? It was now Maomao's turn to be quiet. She quickly looked at her basket, which was full of mushrooms she planned to look through later. Sir, there are lots of interesting mushrooms in there. Mushrooms that grow on dead bodies. Not exactly. I didn't find any that looked like they grew right out of a body. She wondered if mushrooms like that even existed. If they did, she would really like to see one someday. She thought about what could happen. Maomao was just curious, but not many people understood that. Even Gaeshun, who was very careful and neat, didn't understand. He threw all the mushrooms away. She thought he was being mean. Chapter 7 Mirrors. One warm afternoon, Maomao learned that something new from a faraway place had come to the Jade Pavilion. She was asked to go look at it. When she entered the large room, she found a big mirror that showed her whole body. Consort Jyokai stood in front of it, happily holding up new clothes she had purchased from the travelling merchants. Hongyang was neatly folding the cloth that had been used to protect the mirror. You might think a mirror isn't a big deal, even a tall one, but when Maomao saw it she was surprised, and it wasn't just because of how big it was. Now this is something you don't see often, she thought. Mirrors were usually made of bronze like the shiny metal Maomao used, but this mirror wasn't metal at all, and it showed Jyokai's face much clearer than any bronze mirror could. He, I wonder if you know what it's made of, Jyokai said. Maybe glass, milady. Jyokai made a little face. She was right. Yinghua and Gyuan were very excited. Wow, it's like there are two of you, Lady Jyokai. Yes, it's wonderful. We had a mirror before, but Yinghua accidentally broke it. Oh, don't remind me. Mirrors made of glass weren't super common, but people had seen them before. Making these objects was hard work, and not many existed because they came from faraway lands. This made them very expensive. If a lady's helper accidentally broke one, she could be in big trouble, even lose her job. Maomao was lucky that consort Gyokaiu was a very nice person. Looking at the beautiful new treasure, Maomao began to understand why everyone was so excited. A metal mirror usually makes colors look a little blurry, but this mirror was special. The glass was pulled long and flat, and it was perfectly smooth. The reflection you saw in it was clear and bright. Yinghua smiled when she noticed Maomao looking closely at her reflection. So this is interesting to you too, Maomao? Yes, I wonder how they make something like this. If we knew, we could probably sell it for a lot of money. Yes, definitely, Yinghua said, gently patting Maomao on the shoulder. Perhaps she had wanted to hear what someone else thought. Did the emperor give it to her? Maomao asked. No, it was a gift from visitors from another country, Gyokaiu said, giving the clothes to Gyuan and sitting on the couch. Visitors from another country, ma'am. Maomao remembered the doctor mentioning something similar before. He said the recent group of travelers was large because they were preparing to welcome visitors. Yinghua sounded annoyed. Hongyang told her to be more polite, but she probably felt the same way. Gyokaiu was as important as the other three main consorts, so the travelers should treat them all equally. Maomao thought it must have taken a lot of work to bring such nice gifts. Glass could break easily, whether it traveled over land or sea. People would have to be careful with it so it didn't shatter. Looking at the mirror, Maomao thought if the visitors were giving such beautiful gifts to the consorts, they must want to make a big trade deal. What did they want? The next day Gaoshan came to see her for advice. What's happening? Maomao asked as she poured tea. Hongyang, the most important lady-in-waiting, was also there. She probably thought no man, even a eunuch, should be alone with a palace woman. Right now she looked tired as she watched Gaoshan. Hongyang was in her 30s and had thought this kind, hard-working man might be a good husband for her, but she quickly lost interest when she found out he was already married with children. She didn't want to be anyone's second wife. Hongyang was a very good helper to the main lady, so she didn't expect to get married very soon anyway. Gaoshan didn't seem to mind that Hongyang was there, which made Maomao think it wasn't a big deal. I wanted to ask what you think, Zairamo, he said. Gaoshan explained that this visit wasn't about Jinchi at all. He had been asked for help by a friend, and today's visit was because of that. This happened before, like when a friend needed help with a case of food poisoning. Maybe this new problem was similar. If you think I can help, Maomao said, and she sat down in a chair. Hongyang kindly made tea for Maomao. She had been making tea for a long time and was very good at it, but she got a little annoyed when Maomao said her tea was delicious. It seemed she didn't like being reminded of how old she was, and Maomao remembered that. Okay, Gaoshan said and started to speak. A fancy family had 2 daughters. The 2 girls were about the same age and looked alike, and their parents loved them very much, maybe a little too much. They wanted to keep their daughters safe, so when the girls grew up, their parents didn't want them to go anywhere without someone watching them. They stayed inside most of the time, and even then there were always women nearby to keep an eye on them. These women felt sorry for the girls. They thought it was a little unfair, and often helped them sneak out of the house when their parents weren't looking. That good feeling didn't last very long, and when people discovered what they were doing, guards were stationed outside the girls' bathroom too. Maybe that's what made the sisters, who were usually pretty quiet, start spending all day, every day doing their favorite hobby, embroidery. They rarely spoke to anyone except their father. The male guards watching them were supposed to stay at least 50 meters away from where the girls lived. At night, their father locked the building so they couldn't go anywhere. After a while, something surprising happened. One of the girls, the younger sister, found out she was going to have a baby. Her father was very angry. He wanted to know how this could happen when she had never even held a boy's hand. Her mother cried, sad that this had happened to her daughter before she was married, but her older sister stood up for her. She said something almost as surprising as what happened. She said a magical, long-lived being had caused it. Her parents were still very upset. They thought her story was silly. The guards had done their job very well, and the young women's mother and father were upset. They fired the women who had helped their daughters leave the house and hired new ones. These new women weren't allowed to get too close to the daughters, so they wouldn't feel sorry for them. Her parents were confused because it seemed like only magic could have explained how anyone got inside the building. That is a strange story, Maomao said, drinking her tea. Hongyang joined them and started sharing the snacks. She cut open a big mooncake filled with walnut paste. She was very interested in the story, saying how awful. When they learned the girl was going to have a baby, my friend didn't know what to do, so he asked for my advice. It was a hard situation, Maomao said, but it wasn't really my area of expertise. She truly felt that way. Maybe you're wondering if a woman can have a baby without a man's help. Can she? Not really, but sometimes a woman's body acts like it's pregnant even when there isn't a baby growing inside. The human body is full of surprises, and sometimes if you believe something strongly, your body can act like it's true even if it is. If someone doesn't like their job, they might feel sick to their stomach when it's time to go. Maomao knew a young woman who believed she was expecting a baby with the man she loved and acted like she was pregnant, but it was all in her mind. She really wanted to be pregnant, so she started to show the signs. Maomao's father told her this could happen to people and even animals. Gaoshan looked unsure as Maomao explained everything. Finally Maomao asked, was the young woman expecting a baby? Yes, he said, I think so. She noticed he didn't quite answer her question directly, but she decided to wait and see. Then how were the women kept under watch? If there was a chance a young woman could have slipped past the guards, they could move on. Gaoshan took a paper from inside his clothing. The house plan was easy to understand, and seemed like he made it just for Maomao. The area where the girls lived was shown as a simple square, connected to the main part of the house by a covered walkway on the west side. To the north and east, a wall went around the big house. To the south there was a garden. What did people do when they needed to go to the bathroom? They had bathrooms in their building. Bathrooms were usually far away from where people lived. Maomao sadly understood how worried the parents must have been to keep their daughters from leaving. If someone was watching the building, there had to be a way in or out. Where was it? The building only had one door, and it was on the west side. There were 2 windows, one facing east and one facing south. Those were the only ways to get in or out. Gaoshan pulled out a small writing kit and drew circles to show where the windows were. Then Maomao asked, were the guards standing around the main building? The windows of the sisters' building could only be seen from a few places. The guards were probably watching from high spots, so they could look down into the building. Gaoshan seemed to agree with her idea and added 2 more marks, excess this time. He also said the guard to the south was on the 3rd story of the main building, but the guard to the east was on the 1st story. The wall on the east side had a lot of places where someone could hide, so the room could only be seen from the 1st story. Maomao used her finger to follow the lines between the XS and OS. The view from this window isn't very big, she said. Yes, but the women often sat by it for hours doing embroidery. They didn't have many ways to have fun, so they really enjoyed their hobby. It was better to do it by the window than to need a lamp during the day. It was simpler for the guards too. Maomao considered this. She looked at Gaoshan. He seemed calm, but she felt like he wasn't meeting her gaze. She thought this had to do with something about the story that was troubling her. The main woman helping them noticed too. It's a strange hobby doing embroidery, Hongyang said. She had grown up with fancy people, unlike Maomao. Yes, his family used to take care of sheep. Did Maomao think Gaoshan sounded a little funny when he said that? It was as if he was reading from a paper. Hongyang said that for some groups of people, certain designs in embroidery could mean something special. If that was true, it would make his hobby easier to understand. Still, Maomao felt like something wasn't quite right. She looked at the drawing of the building again. It showed all the rooms inside the house. She noticed that the 2 windows on the side and front of the extra building were in one big room, and there were also 2 bedrooms. Was this extra building first made for visitors? She asked. That's a good guess, Gaoshan said. And how many guards were watching it? 2, he answered calmly. Maomao thought he knew a lot about what was happening. He would need to know a lot to make such a good plan, but she felt like he wasn't telling her everything. Without knowing the whole story, Maomao could only give simple answers. She thought for a moment, unsure if she should say more or not. Then Gaoshun showed her something else. Master Jinchi sends his apologies, he said. It seems the special stone you ordered will take a little longer to arrive. It was true Master Jinchi hadn't given her the stone yet. She hadn't asked about it yet, worried she might get bumped on the head again, but it was taking a long time. I'm sorry, Gaoshun said. It looks like more people want it now than before. Why is that? Maomao asked. Gaoshun didn't want to look at her. Hongyang told everyone while drinking her tea that many people had brought Master Jinchi special and valuable medicines recently. People started saying he really liked to collect them. She could be strong with a man, now that she knew he was married, just like she was with the other women at court. Maybe she was trying to tell him not to promise things he couldn't deliver to the women he was with. Whatever she meant, Gaoshun looked sad. Maybe he should say yes to at least one dinner invitation, Hongyang said. He received many invitations from both men and women, and they probably wanted more than just dinner. Being very pretty sometimes caused problems. Okay, fine, Maomao said, taking the small paper package, but she was clearly annoyed. Inside the package was something that looked like a dried orange fruit. Hongyang made a face when she saw it, but Maomao's eyes started to water, which didn't happen very often. She blinked quickly, then looked at Gaoshun. You seem happy, and that's what's important, he said. This is bear gall. Master Jinchi wanted to give it to you himself, but he was too busy. It seemed Master Jinchi had a lot to do. When it came to special medicine like this, Maomao didn't care who gave it to her. Bear gall was the dried gallbladder from a bear, just like its name says. It didn't taste very good, but people used it in medicine to help with stomachs and digestion. Seeing how happy Maomao looked, Gaoshun smiled. The usually serious eunuch was starting to learn what Maomao liked. Did you notice anything different? Gaoshun asked. When he asked her right away like that, Maomao felt she needed to say something. She carefully put the paper package into the folds of her robe, then sat down in her chair. Please wait a moment, sir, she said, and then went to her room. When she came back, she put a small metal plate on the table with 2 nuts. 2 dolls would have been nicer, but Maomao had never really liked girly things. She placed the nuts in front of the window on the floor. I have a question, she said. Were the young women always watched by the same people? Pretty much yes, and were those people always in the same spots? That's correct. Then do you remember what the young women were stitching? I heard they both stitched pictures of animals. Lions and rabbits for the most part. Maomao was still a little surprised that Gaoshun knew so much about what was happening. She put the brass plate, which she usually used as a mirror, near the window on the east side. She moved one of the nuts and bent down to look straight into the metal. She moved the mirror until it was in the best spot, then told Gaoshun, look into the mirror from right here. He did what she said and knelt down to look. He should have been able to see the other walnut. She thought that from where he was, he probably only saw the wall in the mirror. From nearby it could be different, but from far away you might not notice anything. This depends on if there was a big enough mirror in the room, and if the window covered the edges of the mirror. A mirror that big would be worth a lot, and it would need to be made of something better than just brass for people to believe what they saw in it was real. Maomao had just seen a beautiful mirror that would work perfectly. So you mean there was only one girl in the room, and the guard was actually seeing her reflection in the mirror? Maomao nodded her head yes. It was hard to tell the 2 sisters apart, especially from far away. Even if they each wore a different coloured ribbon, the other sister would just tie one of each colour onto her own arms. Then it was still difficult to know who was who. Hongyang found this very confusing. She seemed very interested today. The story really caught her attention. What about the embroidery? She asked. They must have been making different designs, right? Maybe it was a design like this, Maomao said. She borrowed the brush from Gaoshun and drew the face of a laughing person. She flipped the picture over and it quickly changed from a happy face to an angry one. It was a picture that looked different depending on how you looked at it, a neat little trick. Hongyang was surprised. Maomao explained, I think the picture just looked backwards when you saw it in the mirror. Oh, said Gaoshun. If 2 women were near the window, the guards would watch them closely. This would make it easier to sneak out the west side. Gaoshun and Hongyang thought it was a good plan, but Maomao was still thinking about it. It wasn't strange for noble girls to spend time sewing. It wasn't usual here, but it was more common for women from the west. Her father said it happened a lot in the country where he went to school. Then she thought about the visitors from a distant land who brought big mirrors. These mirrors were made so well that they could sometimes be confusing, like in this situation. Geishun said a young woman from a good family had secretly had a baby, but Maomao wasn't sure if that was the whole story. Maybe the woman was hiding something else along with the baby. It wasn't strange for people who might be spies to be treated very well. Maomao wasn't rude enough to ask too many questions, so she quietly touched her robe where she had hidden the bear gall. Now, how can I use this useful item? She wondered to herself. She thought it could be a special kind of medicine, maybe even a powerful one. But that didn't stop her from enjoying the idea of what she could do with it. Chapter 8. The moon spirit stories can change as they travel, and the farther they go, the more different they become from what really happened.